Hello, I'm Professor Lieu. Welcome to our live stream. I'm here today with art prof teaching artist Alex Rowe, and we have a special guest today. We have Scott Gilley, a college student, here with us on the stream, because today we are doing an art school portfolio critique on Scott's artwork. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't afford an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof, critiques and tutorials. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about your portfolio, why you're making it? Because I know right now you are a cognitive science major at Carnegie Mellon, but you are exploring other options. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So essentially, right now I am a cognitive science student, but lately over the past year, I've been shifting more towards the art side. And yeah, I'm just interested in things like character design. I'm a little bit interested in animation, and generally illustration, I would say, sums up what I'm interested in. And this portfolio was mainly meant to convey some sense of technical skill and also just, I guess, my creative process to these schools that I'm applying to, art and design schools.
Great. Well, we're going to take a look and you'll help us out because we love it when the artist is here with us live and we can have a conversation. So Alex, what is your first take on Scott's portfolio overall before we start going through the individual pieces?
First take, as I look at it overall, right on the bat, I think it needs a little bit more presence of color throughout it. But I do love the varying subject matter just right off the bat, like several still life, hand drawings, figure drawings, then more creative illustrative pieces. And I think that variety is a good place to start with the portfolio.
Yeah, I think definitely color, you just got to do it. It's not that you're not good at it, you're just not doing enough of it. And color can be intimidating for a lot of people. I was terrible at color for years and years, and I was just freaked by the idea of color. So I would actually encourage you to go like over the top with color, like to the point that it makes you uncomfortable and you're like, oh, this looks really bad. But that's really the only way, I think, to get better at color. I would also say you got to work on composition because you have a lot of pieces in your portfolio that feel like drawing exercises, which is fine for a few. But I feel like most of the portfolio feels like it's drawing class exercises. So you might want to take out a few of those and start thinking about pieces a little bit more holistically, because actually, well, this moves us on to the first piece. This is one of my favorite pieces in your portfolio, Scott. Like, I find this piece very intriguing in terms of subject matter. And it does feel like it's saying something more than I'm trying to get better at light and shadow. Alex, what do you think about this piece?
I'd agree, and I think it's hitting on a cool thing of the use of the black paper with the color on top of it. And that kind of gives me a thought for how you can incorporate color into later pieces and kind of challenge that use of them, is instead of using black or gray or traditional colored papers, using almost like a brighter color, say like a pink, and then use pastel or colored pencil on top of that. Because that right away is going to challenge you as to how to make that unique background color work for the composition and how to use creative colors to make that work. And so the first one will probably turn out awful because they do, but I think that that's going to be a really good way to jump forward with the color. Like how the background here of the TV screen is doing so much for that presence of the face.
Scott, what was the idea behind this piece? Was there a particular story you're trying to tell?
Yeah, so essentially I've been consuming a lot of media during as we all have during this pandemic. And I think that I just kind of wanted to get at the feeling of almost having something replace your mentality, personality, having, media or TV, whether it's nonfiction or fictional, kind of replace your outward face, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common feeling for a lot of us right now. And I think this is a really good idea that you can develop, because my feeling is that this piece is almost there, but it still feels like you're warming up to something. So I might encourage you to go back into this piece and really like flush it out. Like it's sort of is distracting that the shoulders just stop. Like, just let them go off the page. I mean, it's a minor thing, but it makes a big difference in terms of the piece really feeling more like a complete composition. So Neil is saying, I'd say Scott needs more experimentation. Just have fun, make whatever. You never know what you'll find. So is experimentation something that you want to do? Or do you feel like you're doing enough of it, Scott? What do you think?
No, I definitely agree with Neil. I think that experimentation has been interesting to me lately. I think it's been coming up a little bit more because I'm in a weird position where I'm sort of learning about art as I'm making my portfolio. So some of these lend themselves to be technical exercises more, but I feel like I'm kind of freeing myself up a little bit more. This was actually one of my more recent pieces where I'm experimenting a little bit more.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at this one. And I believe this is digital, right, Scott?
It is digital. I use Procreate.
Cool.
Okay. Alex, what's your first take?
That's the first thing I wanted to say is that I love the variety of mediums in the portfolio, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. But yeah, between charcoal, pencil, colored pencil, pastel, and Procreate, just that breadth is a good thing to see for the portfolio. And I think with this one, it's cool because Procreate is allowing you to free up your colors a little bit more. But I would look at the colors of the shadows you're using. Like, it seems to be all the same kind of tone of just a darker tone of the original for the shadows. And instead looking at how the light changes the color of the shadow. Like a warmer light will lead to a cool, almost blue shadow and vice versa. But yeah, I think the structure of it is great. The expression is stellar. And I think it's a good look for the character design segment of it. I think the only thing further for this one is to see more of this character.
Do you mean in terms of like really showing the upper part of the shoulder type of thing?
Oh, no, to clarify, like, would you say the interest in character design, I would show like this piece and then alongside next to it, sketches and examples of full body, different poses, kind of showing the examination of the full character and the world it's in. And of course, in just the portfolio, it doesn't need to be a completely fleshed out character, but just the thoughts of those concepts behind it.
Kaylin Griffin is saying, I hated color until my teacher made us do self-portraits with only super saturated colors, almost neon. Those really intense colors really helped me understand color better when using a normal palette. So Scott, why do you think you have a little bit of hesitation when it comes to color? Is it not the right media? Have you struggled with it? Or what's the story with color?
Right. I think I have a little bit better of a formal education right now with just monochromatic or I guess grayscale media. And I think trying to self-teach or kind of experiment, I guess, I've been a little bit apprehensive about that. And going forwards, definitely I want to try, as the comment said, using more intense colors, but not as the final product, but instead kind of as an ingredient, I suppose.
Yeah, we have a lot of really good suggestions here, like Slupnir is saying, what if the shadow were bluish, as opposed to just say a darker color of the skin tone? And Lisa H is saying, needs to go further, background and composition. W315 says, I like the soft blending on the cheeks, but it needs to show texture in the hair. So, yep, we're getting a lot of really good, specific, concrete comments here. I mean, I'll tell you, Scott, my favorite part of this portrait, I'm sorry, it's the zygomatic arch. On the right-hand side, I just am like, ooh, that's a very satisfying cheekbone. And so there I have evidence that you can really show bony structure in a successful manner, but we have to start applying that to the whole figure, not just in a couple of sections. And I want to also say what W315 said about the hair, that the hair feels almost like a solid form, and we want to get it to have a little bit more texture and movement. Okay, Alex, how about this piece? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this one's pretty rad. I think it's using the whole page of the composition as well, and it's starting to get to the point of the eye going through, traveling down the arm towards the face. This is one so far that I think is a little unfinished and just a little bit more work to iron that out. And I think that it's all about the value for that. It's celebrating right now the kind of light and then midtones but then balancing some of the darks. And it's funny, when we get to your later pieces, it's stuff you're doing in other pieces. I think it just needs to be combined with this one a bit more. We're really getting those crisp darks, and then the midtones of gray is really going to be successful with this one.
And Scott, what did you draw from for this particular drawing?
Unfortunately, I had to draw from a photograph for this drawing, but I'm looking for some way to get an actual reproduction of this so I can physically see it. And I think that the local art department might have a similar statue, not this one exactly, but a miniature of it.
Yeah, it's a bummer that the museums are not as accessible right now, because that was my favorite thing in high school. I'd go to the museum and just draw from the sculptures. It's awesome. It's like people, but they never move. So it's a really good subject to explore. My thought about this piece is you have some really nice shadow work in the neck, specifically around the clavicle area. Like, that area to me feels very substantial. But then I feel like you chicken out a little bit when we move to the left-hand side of the shoulder. You seem to sort of disappear. But there are other moments, like, do you guys see the upper left-hand corner, that like little wing that's sticking out? I'm going to guess this is like Hermes, the god of something. I can't remember what. But there's like a lot of concrete quality there. Like, it feels very tangible, like I could touch it. And so I would love for that quality to happen in the rest of the piece. Like, I think the lower right-hand corner with the drapery, it gets a little bit monotonous. Like, it feels like you didn't observe as carefully there. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think that, to echo what you said about the wing, I love that delicate just gesture, the suggestion of it. And I think that's so much detail and form and texture is shown in that. And I think that could be a cool way to work on drawing this as a statue. Like, if you said you're like looking at getting a physical one to draw from, since the statue is a subject that doesn't move, it's a good exercise to practice timing yourself in quick burst of trying to see how much of that figure you can get in 30-second time frame. And I think that's going to be a cool way to get that whole scope of it together.
Abstract Kitty is saying, I really like the illusion of detail, but the proportions could definitely use some work. Yeah, a lot of that is just training your eye, making comparisons, and really like jumping around. Because I find a lot of the times when proportions get wonky, it's because people spend too long in one area and they don't develop the other areas. And so that's where your proportions get all funny. So just try to leap around a little bit more. We have some smarty pants people in the chat who are informing me, AJ, Hermes is the messenger of God. Thank you very much. You know, you just had a little brain fart. That's all. I'm getting old. And Kaylin says, he seems to have a good sense of form. Scott, have you tried sculpture before? That might be something cool for a portfolio piece. Have you done any 3D work, Scott?
The most I did is I bought some sculpting clay from Amazon, and that's the most sculpting work I've done so far. But I really plan on busting that out and doing some sort of sculpture because, yeah, it really does interest me. I know, like, my aunt does that.
Cool. All right, so next we have a drawing of a hand, which, by the way, if you guys recognize that position, was from one of our draw-alongs, and I love it when you guys draw along with me. It's so cool. So, Alex, what do you think about this drawing?
I think that it's super rad. I think it's a really good and successful, like, hand-drawing, life-drawing piece for your portfolio, because this one's showing, more so than the last one, a lot of variation in the tones. The proportions are a little bit off in areas, but Scott, in your defense, Claire, this was a very tricky hand pose to do, especially in that ring finger. It's like all of the tricks of enlargement, but not looking distorted. So I think that that just needs a little bit more work on there, but I feel like this is a really good example of your work. And I think the colors, the little bits of reds and purples in there is a really nice subtle touch.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely captured the compression of the flesh in some areas, how it gets like sort of soft and puffy by the fingertips. So I feel like you really did capture the physical qualities of the hand. But I think in general, I guess what I would love to see you do with all your drawings in general is just be bolder and be more aggressive, because you are so careful and considerate with your line work, which is good because you want to have that level of care. But I think to a certain degree, it holds you back a little bit because your drawings, at least this one right now, there's somewhat of a tentative quality to it. And I want you to just sort of slam your foot on the ground and just be really loud with your drawings. Like, I really like this comment from Michael, who's saying, I think Scott should make a lot of work and not care about the outcome. So I wonder if it's just being a little bit too careful with your drawings and maybe being more blunt and letting your drawing be uglier. I don't know. Do you think you feel hesitant, or am I just reading too much into it?
No, I think that's a good analysis of it. I think kind of loose mark making is something that I need to look into a little bit more. And that almost sounds paradoxical, because the more you look into it, the more you're caring about it. But I guess what I should say is there was something that you said the other day in a draw along, and it was just be confident when you make a line. And that doesn't necessarily mean overthink it, but be confident. And that helped me a lot.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at this one of these mannequin studies. Are these all done from life, Scott?
These are done from life.
Okay, cool. So you were able to like position it and observe it the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay, Alex, what do you think?
Cool. So first thought was actually to lead it back to another one. This is exactly the kind of thing. Imagine if this was the fictional character you'd made to include next to it, like a finer finished face portrait, and then some of these studies. Because yeah, as of now, I think that they're not showing anything that's not already shown in the pieces, but better in other pieces. I do like some of the shadow, though, on the mannequin on the right-hand side. That nice, oh, I'm sorry about that. The nice shadow underneath the leg as it's running. But the figure on the left, the shadows are just a little too neutral. It's too just mid-tone.
Yeah, and you know something else, Scott, is since you have the mannequin actually in real life, you should start doing some weird positions with it. Because that's the advantage of having something right in front of you, is you can twist it and turn it. And I mean, I think it'd be fun to take this mannequin and put it in different places around your house and draw the mannequin in an environment. Like, what does the mannequin look like if it's sitting on the side of the kitchen shelf? What if it's sitting on the floor next to a table? Like, have fun with this object. Like, Alex, don't you think that's something to really push when you actually have the object?
I think it's a great point. And more so than a crazy pose, I'm thinking a crazy background for it. Because that's one thing through the pieces, is pushing your backgrounds further in comparison to your subject matter is a great area that could be improved. And the opportunity of setting like a stage for the mannequin is a really good chance. Even if you get two pieces of cardboard against a base and the mannequin in the center, then you could have incorporated in the composition the shadows, the environment, the backgrounds, all within the same study. And it could become a really powerful piece in and of itself.
All right. I would also say, Scott, you need to work on photographing your artwork, because I'm going to guess, is this a pencil drawing on a white sheet of paper?
Yeah.
Because it's blue. And so you don't want your drawings to be blue. And if you watch this stream, I go through everything you need to know to photograph your work, because especially for art school applications, it can really be a problem when somebody has like really good work, but the photo of the artwork is not so great. So definitely take a look at that before you actually send in your application. Okay, Alex, how about this hand drawing?
Yeah. I think this one's really cool, and the playing with the white chalk on it. Now, in this one, it is on like a gray piece of paper, right? Or gray, dark brown. Yeah. I think this exactly with what we said earlier about onto colored paper. Look how already just that thought of adding the highlight, I think, is doing a lot for your work with value and incorporating it in the composition. I do think this one, though, is crying more for a background presence, more so that the other hand drawing wasn't. This one is definitely craving that connection or that environment around it. Not a full scene around it necessarily, just some compositional help and shadows in the background to assist it, because it's clearly a hand study.
Well, that's another thing to consider is that a lot of the pieces we're looking at, they're clearly like exercises that we've seen and you're just studying the form and that's fine. But it does seem like in a lot of the pieces, you're not so keen on backgrounds. Is that true? Or is there a reason you're avoiding them? What's the story on backgrounds?
Sure. So I think I get in a kind of pickle here because on things like these, I say, okay, they're an exercise. They don't need a background. And then, for example, like with my elf drawing, I said, okay, so here's this elf and a background might distract from the character. And I feel like I'm kind of making excuses for these as the running theme here. So yeah, no, totally. I'll keep that in mind about backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Scott, if I had $1 for every art student who told me that, oh, if I had a background, it'll mess up. Yeah, that's an excuse and you got to get over it because especially for character design, environments are so important. Alex, why is environment important if you're inventing a character?
I think specifically for character design, it's because you need the world that the character stems from and you need that full scope and picture. But I think even more basically, even in a character design image or even in a practice thing, think of it not as you're learning how to draw a hand and you're practicing drawing a hand. Think of it every page as a chance to, like, gaining experience in composition happens every time. And the background is the way to incorporate all of that. We're not separating background and subject matter, but viewing the whole thing as one image.
I mean, another thing you could try, Scott, is if you're just doing a lot of studies of hands, take a sheet of paper and draw 6 hands on a single page, because then you do have to think about, okay, well, how do I place this one? How does it relate to the other ones? And so probably my recommendation would be when you do these studies and exercises, don't just do 1 hand per page. Maybe you add a head up there. Like some of my favorite pieces are those like sketchbook pages by Da Vinci and Raphael, and you see like a baby's butt at the bottom and you see a Madonna on the upper right-hand corner. You know, like it's really fun to see how things can flow on a composition, even if it's not one that you plan in advance. Because yeah, I think the thing about this piece is I like the technique, but I still feel your drawing's a little bit stiff and I want you to just let loose a little bit more. And Amelia is saying the highlights look beautiful, but it needs more shadowing in the background. It would make the hand pop out. And let's see. Neil says my solution for that is to make a piece that's just background. Well, that's a good idea. Don't have the hand and you have to put something there, right? I mean, that's one way to think
That's
about
almost cruel, though.
Okay, Alex, how about the skull?
The skull is, so in earlier pieces, like when I said like the ones that were doing it really well, the skull was the one I had in my mind of how the highlight at the center of it is really subtly growing out into the shadows around it. And then you're leaving those dark shadows, but it's not just like filled in blank in the eyes. There are actually spaces within there. And for the nose and on the right side of the eye here, it kind of gets into the zone of just heavy black mark making that doesn't work too well. But it's one of those great pieces where you're doing all the right stuff in this piece just elsewhere, and it just needs to be incorporated into those areas that need a little bit of work. Like the jaw comes forward a little too much because it's the brightest area. And making that shape and space work for you better with the shading you're already doing here.
And Scott, did you have a real skull for this drawing?
I had a plastic Halloween skull.
That's better than a real skull. I mean, it's like a real skull. You're not supposed to have those. It's illegal. Well, it's something. I mean, it's an object, which is helpful because you know what I really like about this piece? This is definitely your boldest drawing that we've seen so far. I'm going to disagree with you, Alex. I like the blacks. I think they're very satisfying and bold and luscious. And like Tom G saying, your dad, the skull has some boldness. And Cerulean is saying, I like how there's some nice darks in this. And Neil is saying the skull feels so primitive in a good way. I love how rough it is. So Scott, were you trying something different here or was it an accident? Because to me, this almost feels like it was drawn by a different person.
I was using I was using the Caran d'Ache crayons. And I think that I was also using mixed media paper. just because those were the two things I had on hand, and I just really like went for it. Like I just totally made the darks darker than I had before, and didn't worry about overworking it. And I think that's kind of close to what you were getting at earlier with not worrying too much. So I think that helped.
I mean, I would say, Scott, whatever you did that day, you got to bottle it, because you just need to be like that all the time, because we're getting some great comments. Like Lisa is saying, good texture. Emily is saying, I love how tactile it seems. And 10,000 Crows says, satisfying. So I would just love to see more. And W315 wants to know, is it illegal to have a real skull? Yeah, like, I mean, they're going to ask you how you got it at some point, I believe. So yeah, we'd love to see more of this, Scott, because this really has like a punch to it. Like Alex, I love those eye sockets. What do you think about the eye sockets?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you too well. Could you say that again?
The eye sockets. What do you think about them?
I love them. And then the point where we differ on our opinion of like the darks, where I think they come in too strong without carving enough of the space out. But in the eye sockets, I think they do really well, where the transition from the lights to the darks fading into the pitch black is knocking it out of the park.
All right, let's take a look at this drawing, which also is from one of our draw-alongs that I did a little ways back. I love it when you guys draw with me. It's so much fun to see how everybody interprets the same reference photo differently. So it's just great to see this. So Alex, what do you think about this drawing?
I think that I don't like it as much as the other longhand drawing, but I think that there's some good elements in here that could be incorporated into that one. Namely, I think the use of line you have in this one is really gentle and it's really bold at the same time. I don't want to overuse the word delicate, but it has that great form to it that I think could be transitioned into the other one as well. Whereas other than that, I think this one's not really showing anything else that the portfolio isn't showing better elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't think it's as strong as some of your other drawings, but what I do like about it is this little pocket of space that's in the palm. Everybody see this like little area there? Like I feel like you did a really nice job of like constructing the negative space in there, because if you guys look at the it's a weird pose. I mean, it's like, even if you draw it, quote, accurately, you're still going to have a funky looking hand. But I just really like how dark you got into that center area. Did you find this pose really challenging, Scott?
I did, because, and this actually wasn't even brought up to me by myself, but it's a really quick, like 10-second story. I went to a portfolio interview and they said, I find this piece really interesting because it only has 4 fingers. And I was like, oh my gosh, I swear the photo looks like that. And because it was so difficult. It was so difficult to draw, but yet I love the pose so much. I mean, it's super interesting.
It does only have 4 fingers.
Yeah.
I think you can see a sliver of the 5th finger to the one that's on, like if you look really carefully, but it essentially is a 4-finger. So,
I think they thought it was because I had an elf in it, so they figured I also drew an alien.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I would just say in this one, this is pencil, right?
Yeah, this is just totally normal pencil.
Do you ever use like graphite powder or like graphite sticks or anything like that?
I didn't actually have access to that at the time I drew this, but recently actually in class we've been using graphite powder. We've been using sandpaper and graphite sticks and shaving some off and then rubbing it into the paper.
Cool.
Cool, because those tools really definitely help. And we have a comment from W315. I like the idea of leaving the light side of the ball completely blank with no line. The shading from highlight to midtone on the ball needs to be more gradual. Yeah, was that on purpose, leaving out that slight edge of the ball?
I did want to do that just because I wanted to rely more on tone than line for creating form. But at the same time, I've had a few people tell me that I should put in line everywhere. So I'm kind of half and half on whether I should add that in.
Alex, what do you think about that area?
I think that line is a weird thing where if you focus on it too much, then you overuse it, or at least I did. And this one, not to keep hitting a dead horse, but if you had that like dark background behind it, so no line around the fuzzy egg shape. I've been curious, Clara, what were you holding in that image? Because it looks like a fuzzy egg.
It's a laundry ball. You put it in with your laundry so it like does a dance with your clothes and like airs them up. I'd never seen them before.
Neither have I, and I love it.
Yeah, it's just the strangest object.
But like, actually,
all right. We've got some linear perspective. You are in so much trouble, Scott. Oh my God. Linear perspective police is here. So Alex, what do we think about this?
I think the biggest thing is keeping track of the vanishing points. That's the big key. And it's the funniest thing with vanishing points is if you get a picture, like just a picture you've taken of real world example, and you track the vanishing points, sometimes those vanishing points can be like so far away from the actual point of contact you're drawing from. But I would definitely bring that into it. However, commend you for, this is Neil's advice of just draw a background, commending you for that. And you can see already how you're using this whole page, you're incorporating all of the area. It just needs to be pushed a little further because this was a big leap.
And Scott, where is this? Did you use a photo? Is this from real life?
It's about 20 feet away from me right now. It's my front porch.
Oh yeah, I can see Tom G is saying that's our porch. Well, that's great that you did something that's like accessible to you that you can really view. And I'll tell you, linear perspective is a pain in the butt if you don't have a ton of experience with it. Did you do any measuring or do you have any training with linear perspective? What's your background in that area?
To be completely honest, this was my first time doing it.
Oh, wow. And did you have any like knowledge of vanishing points and all that stuff?
I put one vanish. I had seen like a couple of videos on it before I'd made this, but it was my first drawing using it. So I put one right in the middle, and then I had like two more that were way off the side of the page. Mm-hmm. So I have a little bit more practice now with 1 and 2 point perspective. But at the time of doing this, that was kind of my method.
Right.
I think this one's worth.
I mean, good for you for doing your first piece. I mean, this is better than what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think this one's worth going back and revisiting, especially what you've learned. But before starting it, I would give the advice just because I remember in my like perspective boot camp I took, one of the first assignments was to draw a house, and we were all flabbergasted. And I think the secret is start with, so using a thumbnail size image, like teeny tiny, like 1 inch by 1 inch, just map out the values of what you want it to look like. Don't be concerned about this perspective or anything. Just map out the lightest light and the darkest dark. So that when you get to the point of mapping it out with the big perspective, you have a frame of reference of, okay, what's going to be in shadow, what's going to be in highlight. Because we're getting some like comments of how the shadows in that piece are going really successfully and starting to create some depth. But I think that's the thing that would help the perspective more so than the practice you're incorporating into it, is to making that space.
But you know what I really like about this drawing, Scott, is so often when I see people doing linear perspective, they're like using a ruler and it's very mathematical and like super tight. So even though your perspective is wonky in a couple of areas, it does achieve what you're trying to do with the background, which to make space. And to me, all that linear perspective stuff, you'll fix it. You'll learn all the logistics, all the nuts and bolts. You'll figure it out. But I know a lot of people, they know all those logistics, but they still can't make a drawing that feels like it has a sense of space. So you'll get there. It's just a matter of time and study. And if you need a good video, we've got you covered with Michael Fassbender. So, if you want to, well, at least for me, I pay attention better when he's in the movie. So anyway, check it out. All right. Is this a soft pastel piece, Scott?
Mm-hmm.
And is this from a live model or is this from a photo?
It's from a photo, unfortunately.
Okay. Alex, what do you think?
Well, one, it's doing drawing from a photo really well. Genuinely, I was going to ask if you didn't, was this live model or a photo? Because it's very unclear. I think it's doing a really good job of not noodling away at points, which is the normal telltale sign of being done from a photo. I like how you're starting to get bold with the colors here. It's just pure yellow on that shoulder, and that's really satisfying. And some of the shadows, they're starting to get purples and reds, and it's getting close to that area of really fleshing out those colors. And the muscles are both accurate, but also stylized as well, which I really like. Like that pad, the flank pad there on the right side of the figure is so satisfying with that little highlight and the shadow curved underneath it.
Yeah, we've got some good comments. Angel is saying, I love those shadow colors. Same thing with Emily. And Tom is saying, this gives the feeling of mass and weight. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like your hand drawing, obviously because it's a hand, it's smaller and it's thinner form. This really has weight. I can feel the gravity. And something, a big part of that is the shading of the shadows that are underneath the figure. So you can see here how important that sense of gravity, how reliant it is on that background really being there to explain how that figure is actually sitting on that area. And I think the thing about this piece is just you need to work on it more. I think it's a very good beginning. It has everything blocked in. You're good to go, but you got to push it a little further. Because my feeling right now, I would say about your anatomy in general, it's a little bit too geometric. I think you could get a little bit rounder, a little squishier, let the figure be a little more bulbous. Because most people, when they draw the figure, it's either too geometric or too mushy. It's like tapioca pudding body. And you want something a little bit in between because the human figure is soft, but it's also rigid. So you want to get that variety. And I think right now what you want to do is just bulge it up, for lack of a better word. All right. So Scott, is this a self-portrait?
It is.
Did you do it from life?
I did it from a mirror. I basically followed the tutorial that you had
Awesome.
for doing it with crayon, except I only had a colored pencil at the time.
Alex, what do you think?
First, it's funny. First, I got to bring up a comment that was about the last piece, but applies to this one as well, in complementing your colors of the yellow shoulder and the purple shoulder, both of them making themselves work better. And it's funny because color is so intimidating, but the simple basics of it are the most successful. And just using those complementaries of yellow and purple is working so well. This one, the colored pencil on this paper isn't working too well for me, just because the yellow and the white applied to it almost becomes invisible. So I can see that you've applied and even hit heavily and freely with those lighter yellows, but it just doesn't come off as well on that paper. So it's something that I would love to see this redone in pastel. I think that would really work well, or with this medium on a different form of paper, maybe some heavier white paper.
David is saying the hopefulness in this piece. I'm glad that you brought that up, David, because I do think this piece has a very delicate presence. Because although we're critiquing some of the formal elements and everything, I think this portrait really does have personality to it. I mean, I love the way the mouth is so almost hidden by the facial hair, and the eyes look very transparent. So there's some really nice physical qualities to it. But I would agree with Alex. I think the thing about the colored pencil is it's getting a little washed out by the color of the paper, although depending on the type of colored pencil you have, if you really exert pressure, like shaking your drawing board pressure, you might be able to do that. So again, that goes back to what I said earlier about having the aggression behind those marks, because we know you can do it. We have evidence in that skull drawing that you can totally push those darks, but you have to do it on a more, I think, regular basis. And 10,000 Crows is saying, I like how Scott's drawings are soft and kind of dreamy. Were you thinking about that, Scott?
I was thinking about it a little bit. I think I did have a little bit, maybe subconsciously, of that vibe when I was working on this picture, because I was just kind of glancing relatively chill back and forth between me and the mirror and then the paper. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad that that came through.
For sure. And this is the self-portrait drawing tutorial, which is in crayon, if you guys want to take a look. Okay, we have a figure drawing here. Is this from a classroom model? Is it from a photo, Scott?
From a photo, again,
Right.
just for the time being.
I mean, pandemic. I can't really do anything about this right now. So anyway, Alex, what do you think?
Right off the bat, I love like how free the stylization is. Like very like cubist almost. And I think that that kind of like throwing caution to the wind as far as concerns about anatomy has really opened up some doors for you about light and shadow and even composition in this one. Like it's almost like the liveliness of it comes through really strong, despite you not worrying too much about the proportions of that figure in a way that I think comes off as clearly stylized in this one.
I guess what I would work on in this one, Scott, is the contact point between the arm of the model and that block that she's leaning against, because again, it's like putting your figure in a place and a context. So things like an object that the figure is leaning on, they don't feel that important, but it's sort of like if you draw a figure sitting on a stool, but you don't draw the stool, it looks really weird. So I would just say when you're drawing anything figurative, if it interacts with anything else, show that, because you need to get it to actually sit within that environment. And I also think that I do like the boldness of the highlights. This is, I think, the first drawing I've seen in the portfolio where your highlights have been this prominent. Is that something you were thinking about?
Yeah, I really tried to go stylized in this, not just with anatomy, but with generally the way that I went about drawing it. So I really made sure to just kind of whatever I did, double the intensity of it in a way. And that includes highlights.
I would keep that going, because you know something? I almost feel like a lot of this stuff, it's like you have to do it to the point that you're incredibly uncomfortable. And then that's actually probably about where it is, because otherwise you end up with sort of a lukewarm version. I think it's more fun when things have a little more punch. Okay, Alex, how about this charcoal drawing?
Yeah, good old goat skull. Love it. This one is, there's a lot of areas that I really, really love in this one. And some areas that I think could be improved a little bit, where once again, I love the eye, that fading socket. It's such a cool look. And I love this one, actually, Clara, I love it in this one, just those bold black blocks in front of and around the teeth. I think those are such cool, like carving placements. But I think that where the dark gray behind it helps and it's starting to get somewhere, it's still a little too blank and bland. It's better than just the blank paper, but it doesn't quite have that punch that it could. And I think that goes for composition for this one. So this is one where I'd love to see it redone, but with a different angle and a different, more dynamic pose for the skull.
Yeah, I actually think that profile views of objects are harder because they just tend to look more flat. And I think that's why oftentimes with portraits, people do 3/4 views, because they just inherently make the head look more three-dimensional. So you might think about the positioning of that. But we have a lot of people who are saying, like Cerulean says, I like the smooth shadows. Emily says, I love the softness. And Maribel says, I love how smooth it looks, really soft. And also Emily says the sense of light coming from the bone is lovely. Yeah, there's a lot of good qualities in this one in terms of the range of value. But I feel the same way as I do with the other ones, that it's like you're off to a good start. I mean, like, do you really think this as a finished piece, Scott, or do you want to work on it more?
Definitely something I want to work on more. I feel like even just from a basic point of view, the background is darker between the jaws, yet in the background on the left, it's not quite as dark. Just as an example of something that I'd like to to work on a little bit more if I redo it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would just recommend in general, work on your pieces longer than you think they should, because that seems like a common thing we're seeing in the portfolio is that we're saying, hey, you're off to a great start. You have all the basics in, you've blocked in stuff really well, but now we got to take it to the next stage. So it really has a lot more resolution. If you guys are interested, you can submit your own portfolio to get a free critique from the Art Prof staff here on YouTube. You may or may not be in the stream with us. Scott decided, and we're so happy when you guys do join us. But if you want us to just critique your portfolio and have you off in the live chat, that's okay too. We always like seeing what you guys are doing. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to go to artprof.org, click on tutorials and project ideas. You're going to scroll down. You're going to go to the Art School Portfolios Guide. And this is a section for people who are applying to art school to give them information. The submission link is in the video description below, so you guys can find that. And on our YouTube channel, we have all kinds of art school portfolio critiques for you guys to take a look at, because really helpful to see what other people are doing and what kind of critique they get. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. We will be hanging out in the Art Prof Discord in a little bit in the post live streams channel. Scott, I really hope you can join us because it's so fun when the artist is with us. Yes, awesome. Subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you to our top Patreon supporters who provide us the support that we need to keep Art Prof up and running. And I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat for encouraging Scott, for giving comments and feedback. It's so, so helpful. And Scott, thank you so much for sharing your work with us and coming onto the stream to talk to us. I think it's just been a wonderful experience, and I hope you have stuff you can refer to as you go forward with your work.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Cool. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.